G'day guys, it's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and this evening we are having a panel discussion on a really important issue that's going to impact recreational sport and general aviation pilots, including commercial pilots and airline pilots that are operating into and out of Wollongong Shellharbour Airport in New South Wales. Now, that airport location is just south of Sydney, and it's a location that has found itself in the centre of a fairly large controversy regarding the construction and installation of an open cycle gas turbine power plant, which is called TALLAWARRA B. And that power plant has been raising some real troubling issues and concerns for the aviation industry around the gas, the efflux, the emissions that will come out of the top of that power station and create vertical updrafts that will pose a significant risk for aviation safety in the area. Now, AOPA has been following this issue for the last couple of years, and we have had some local boots on the ground by way of a gentleman by the name of Mr. John Cleary, who I'll be introducing very shortly. John is heavily involved with the Illawarra Flyers down at Wollongong and is no stranger to the Shellharbour community. He's in fact been one of the proponents of the airport for a long time and a major supporter of aviation in the area. And we're also going to be joined by Matthew Buttell, who's the Chief Executive of the Recreational Aviation Australia Limited, whose members are also going to be deeply and directly impacted by this proposed power station, which at this point in time, I understand, has its approvals to move forward. Now, we've been involved in this for about 2 years, and it's involved a range of consultation which took place between the Civil Aviation Safety Authority and the industry, and also the Civil Aviation Safety Authority and Energy Australia, which is the company seeking to build the power plant. And we're very fortunate that Matthew from RAOs actually is going to be able to speak on both sides of the camp here, because he was involved when he was with the Civil Aviation Safety Authority running some of those consultation engagements and has his own particular insights into that. So without any further ado, I might bring our two guests in today. So first of all, a very big welcome to John Cleary. John, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ben.
And bringing in Matthew Buttell from the RAOs. Thank you, Matthew.
G'day, Ben. G'day, John.
Now, just before we throw ourselves into it, Matthew, I'd just like to extend a very warm welcome to you in participating in this broadcast today. This is the first time that we've had RAOs take part in one of these panel discussions. And I know that obviously there's the relationship at times between RAOs and AOPA has had its moments, but I really do thank you for participating on this important issue. It's an issue that our members collectively and pilots right across the aviation industry share. And I think it's really important that the RAOs be part of this direct conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And you know, look, RAOs, as you said, RAOs, our members are affected as well. And this is, you know, I think of Shellharbour as really becoming, you know, with Western Sydney Airport coming online later this decade, Shellharbour Airport is just such a crucial piece of infrastructure for all aviators, and of course for the good people of Shellharbour, but particularly Southern Sydney, from where I'm from. It's going to become the next, dare I say, Bankstown, or possibly, you know, Bankstown or Camden. So it's a really important issue, and I think thanks for your warm welcome, Ben. And you know, yes, we do stand shoulder to shoulder on a number of issues, and you know, I think it's really important that the aviation community at large sees that, because at the end of the day, this is about aviation. Just one last thing from me before I hand over to John is I really want to put a call out to John and thank John for everything he's done. For those of you who've been involved in this matter for the few years, you'll know that John is, you know, like a dog with a bone on this issue, and is probably considered one of the biggest experts in the aviation industry on plume rises. And yeah, so thanks, John, for everything you've done, and for you and your team at the Illawarra Flyers. It's certainly recognised and very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Well, this is probably a fantastic juncture to hand it over to John. I mean, John, you probably didn't realise early on in your career that you're going to become an expert at plume rise impacts on aviation safety. But I would echo what Matthew has said. You've done an enormous body of work in respect to what has happened at Shellharbour. And I know that it's been an issue which I've had a number of phone calls from people who've said, listen, what's all this about? It's such a technical issue. It has such technical aspects to the design of the power plant itself, the the diffuser system that Energy Australia had proposed, and the process. And so maybe a great place to start this evening is for you to provide us a layman's overview in simple layman's terms as to what the project has been about, what the risks have been about, so that we can get everyone on the same page. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think probably the best place to start is what's it all about from a pilot's perspective. And I've got my trusty little aeroplane here, and there's a bit of a problem here because the screen's back to front. But when we're in cruise mode, our aeroplane is flying with what's called an angle of attack between the wings and the airflow of about 3 degrees, round numbers. And at cruise, the critical plume velocity, which is the way CASA measures what's safe and what is not safe, is 6.1 metres a second. Now, as we get closer to the circuit and we start to slow down, we have to pull our nose up to hold altitude. And so the angle of attack gets higher. Now, if that angle of attack gets up to 16 degrees or thereabouts, the aeroplane will stall and stop flying. Now, once we go past what's called VA, we move from risking structural damage to the aeroplane, and we move to a point where when we get hit by a wind shear from the plume, the aeroplane, being in an angle like this, will just stall. And at that height, you're talking, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet, generally crosswind, there's no room to recover. So, I think that's, I don't know whether that's simple enough, Ben, or is that what you're looking for? But
no, that's exactly right. And so, just to recap, what we're looking at here is a situation where we can be in flight within that Wollongong Airport area. And just to begin with, this proposed facility is within very close proximity to the airport itself. And in fact, if you were flying within the circuit area and you were not flying we'll call it I fret to use the word a standard circuit, because what is a standard circuit? But if you were flying a standard circuit, fine. But if you got distracted or for any other multitude of reasons, you got yourself wide or long, you're going to end up flying over the top of this power plant. And so you're going to be flying along. You're going to be, chances are, not at a high speed. And you're going to hit this vertical updraft. And that vertical updraft not only has the likelihood of creating a stall condition, but it can also create a significant upset recovery situation where the aircraft can end up, quite literally, can end up inverted, depending on the conditions of the day and also the type of aircraft. And again, Matthew, this, our discussions at the CASA consultation process has highlighted this, that the 10,000 members of the RAOs, this is your domain. These are your aircraft, the small, lightweight airplanes that are typically found operating in and out of locations like Wollongong, which is a great example of where RAOs traffic has really burgeoned. This is really going to impact on those airplanes and create an unsafe condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just call out, you mentioned talking about my former employer, the fact that I was with CASA. I just want to put some caveats around the fact that certainly I'm not here to speak for CASA or to divulge the company secrets of CASA. But certainly my role there was as the chair of the RAPACs around the country. And for those of you that don't know what that was, it was the Regional Airspace Procedures Advisory Committee. And this is where John first brought it to my attention when I was chairing that. I think it was about 2018. And, and the subsequent RAPAC meeting was where Ben came along, and I think there would have been 40 or 50 other people squashed in a room in the CASA office in Sydney, and including former Qantas, A380 captains, 747 captains, who one of whom was flies the Connie for Haas, and really described that this isn't a problem just for small aircraft. Even the Constellation, its engine out departures off 3-4 there at Wollongong or Shellharbour would be certainly affected. The location of this, just northeast of runway 34, puts it in a very precarious position, particularly if you're on 16 and you're doing a left circuit. It's exactly where you're about to turn. And we've just had RALs, we've just had our National Safety Month, and loss of control is our largest safety concern. And stall spin accidents are globally a huge issue. And this is just really going to up the ante And, you know, it is quite a unique situation, I think, seeing this being built within the circuit area. I'm not sure, John, whether there are any other examples of this in Australia, but you know, locally, you know, knowing the area myself, it's very disappointing. I think that we see that this is approved.
Okay, well, John, you've just discussed that this is going to impact aircraft and the vertical updraft is the issue. Could you maybe just share with us a little bit, what is the power station? What is the power station system that has been proposed? And that will give us some background as to how this updraft comes to be.
Just before I go there, Ben, one of the things I'd just like to tidy up is we talk about this being an issue for the smaller aircraft, and I'd like there to be no doubt this is an issue for every aircraft that flies out of Shellharbour Airport. We're talking about you know, the greatest risk is going to be in light to variable or light northeasterly winds, with aircraft departing on runway 34, turning crosswind at around about 500 feet, climbing up through 700 feet to 1,000 to go downwind or to depart. At around about 700 feet, you're going to hit the plume, and we're talking about a plume anywhere up to about 12 metres a second, which is way beyond anything any aircraft flying out of Shellharbour Airport can handle. They will stall. An aircraft that does almost every takeoff over the top of TALLAWARRA is the skydive aircraft. It is fully loaded, climbing out, and it is, in my opinion, the highest probability aircraft of being caught out by this plume.
Well, John, I think let's stress that point, and maybe you're not prepared to say it. I will. It's very clear that a fully loaded skydiving aircraft encountering this kind of dangerous updraft, it is going to place lives at risk. It has a direct and meaningful impact on aviation safety.
Yep, no question. And what a lot of people don't appreciate, Ben, is that Energy Australia have also in the background had approval for development of what they call, I can't remember now, TALLAWARRA something or other, but the area between Haywards Bay and the hill at Dapto is pretty much going to be filled up with residential, and so it's going to be very risky, no question about it. Sorry, now what was your question?
Okay, so let's shift gears. Let's go back to the design of the power plant. Why we've got this vertical updraft.
Yep. Okay. There, with gas-fired power stations, they come in two varieties. The cheapest one is what's called an open cycle gas turbine. It is a jet engine. It's driving a turbine, and it puts its exhaust straight up into the atmosphere. Since in 2007, True Energy, who were the people who are Energy Australia, they became Energy Australia. True Energy had built TALLAWARRA A. It's a combined cycle gas turbine power station. And they announced in 2007 that they intended to build an open cycle gas turbine. Ever since then, there's been a whole series of plume rise assessments and aviation impact assessments done by people like Ambigi, Jacobs, and etc. And every assessment that's been done has demonstrated that an open cycle gas turbine poses a risk to aviation safety in a circuit. There has not been one that's done that hasn't shown that. And I've lost my bloody train of thought again.
No, that's actually a really critical point. I mean, and I've seen this and we've discussed it at length, that the evidence is overwhelming that this does represent a significant risk, and given its proximity and location, it's really incompatible. So we've got this vertical updraft that comes out of it. Now, the consultation phase that was run was all about trying to work through what the aviation safety concerns would be. We advocated pretty clearly on these issues, and I believe that Energy Australia were asked at some point to revisit the proposal with respect to trying to lower the vertical updrafts because they did pose a risk. What happened through that process, John?
So Energy Australia had tried a couple of ways to get this approved, and Matt talked about one, which was having an airspace change proposal to put a danger area over the TALLAWARRA area, which had to go through the RAPAC meeting. But CASA, after that, suggested to Energy Australia that they try a mechanical diffuser on top of the stack. And Jacobs, who worked for Energy Australia at the time, did quite a bit of work on that, put together a technical memo, which showed conclusively that a mechanical diffuser on top of the stack would not solve the problem, because the majority of the plume rise is caused by thermal energy, and the thermal energy is caused by the difference in temperature between the exit plume out of the stack, whether it goes horizontal or vertical, and the ambient temperature. So with the plume diffuser on, and they've tried several different versions now, the one they're currently using puts the gas out horizontally at a massive velocity, and it in a very short space of time gets turned upwards, and then within a short space of time there's 3 plumes. They join together, and as soon as they join together, the vertical velocity increases, and it actually accelerates up to around about 700 feet. At about 700 feet, it reaches pretty much maximum velocity of about 12 metres a second, and then it systematically opens out in volume up to about 2,700 feet, and it's got its maximum surface area at about 2,700 feet, still in excess of 6 metres a second.
Okay, now we're getting very technical. I'm going to try and recap this into some short sound bites. I'll do my best, guys. But where we're at with this is that the Energy Australia proposal came before CASA at the time to look at the safety issues and the airspace issues. At the time the proposal came forward, the vertical updrafts were in exceedance. They exceeded the value that was considered safe. Energy Australia were asked to go away and have a look at the project, and they came up with an engineering quote-unquote solution, alleged quote-unquote engineering solution that would diffuse out slightly sideways. But the problem is it simply rejoins, and the vertical updraft at the centre keeps its velocity. And somewhere along the line in this process, the plume velocity figure that would be acceptable for CASA changed. What happened with that, John?
Well, there's been quite a few changes. So if you go back, and it all starts with the Airports Act and the Airports Protection of Airspace Regulations, 1996, and the CASA 1998 regulations, all of which refer back to Part 12 of the Act. And the Act is very clear that if you've got a plume with a velocity at 4.3 metres per second at the point of coming out the top of the stack, and it penetrates an OLS, then that is not permitted to be built. Now, back in 2007, when Energy Australia declared they were going to build this open cycle gas turbine, they couldn't get the numbers right. In 2010, CASA told them that they didn't have to look at all the data from the TAPA model, that they could reduce that to 99.9% of the data, and the effect of that was to throw away the worst 44 results. Now, I followed up with CSIRO about that. CSIRO are the model, they built the TAPA model, and they verbally did not support going to 99.9%. Mathematically, it makes no sense at all. It's just nonsense. And it pretty much came out of the blue. All it did was just enable them to get a lower plume velocity from the model rather than actual. So the next thing that happened was, at the time, all the guidance material reflected the Act, and it referred to 4.3 metres per second. It differentiated between aircraft in cruise and aircraft at low altitude, and it made a particular point of aircraft in reduced energy state, coming in, working within an airport. Systematically over time, Kate Stone worked with CASA and between them, they rewrote the advisory documentation, and the current version basically says that if the proponent does some calculations and they come in under less than 6.1 metres per second, they do not have to talk to CASA, full stop. And that's how it's degenerated. Now, CASA have no authority to do that. CASA's job is to administer and regulate the rules, not to change them. And the rules are very clear. 4.3 metres per second at the point of emission under an OLS, cannot build it, full stop.
So I'm being very careful here. trying not to throw a question at Matthew with the word CASA involved in it because I don't want to get him in trouble. So I'm just going to keep on John here, and I'm not being rude to you, Matthew. I want to try and create a little bit of separation for you. I'm known to be a bad guy. I don't want you necessarily to be tarred with that brush. So John, we had this situation where this proposal came before CASA to look at the airspace issues and the safety concerns. At the time it came before CASA, it really didn't meet the standard.
No.
It went through a brief consultation phase, and then CASA came back and suddenly a rejigging of the goalposts occurred.
Yep.
A alleged diffuser model was put together. Energy Australia claimed that they could meet the necessary benchmarks, and from there, the project has continued on to receive a New South Wales government approval for them to proceed to construction. Now, an area of concern here, and Matthew's very much external to this, he would be entirely unaware of these points, and I just want to caveat that by saying he is not offering any opinion on any of this. He's just sitting there as an unwitting witness to the conversation. But troublingly, and I think that the viewers of this program, who tomorrow will be representatives of the New South Wales government at the highest level, what they need to understand is, shortly after that rejigging took place, AOPA was contacted by several whistleblowers from within Energy Australia. And they reached out to the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association to have a conversation because they allege, and they were quite intimately involved in the project, but their allegations are that Energy Australia had literally fiddled the diffusing system in order to achieve a mathematical average change, but no velocity change at all. Now, at the time that whistleblower came forward to speak to me, I also had them have a conversation with you, John, just to give you some background information. And hopefully you're able to corroborate what I'm saying, that everything I'm saying right now is factual, that the complaint is that this person within Energy Australia and one other had lodged formal complaints within the company that it was gaming the system. It had lodged formal concerns for the safety of aviation with the design that had been proposed, and that they had been thoroughly ignored, and it was clear to them that the project was being railroaded at whatever cost. The objective and the outcome was simply to get the project approved and to get the project built. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think that's dead right. And what they did was in the end, they got agreement to halve the maximum velocity. And Catestone was working with CASA to rewrite the guidance material. We actually contacted Catestone to see if they would provide an assessment for council, and we were part way through that assessment when we had a call from the chap who was who in Catestone to say that he'd been called by one of his directors and told they weren't allowed to work with council on this project. Catestone subsequently became Energy Australia's consultants, and they're the ones who have just done all this work on the aviation impact assessment, and they actually coordinated the plume modelling.
So some real conflicts of interest going on there, John.
A lot of dirty work. Now, one of the things I'd like to show you is the Catestone actually dictated to Stacey Agnew, the people who did the plume modelling, and they told them the conditions under which to do the plume modelling. So basically what they give them is a temperature, an ambient temperature and a wind condition to use. And that the first runs were done under those instructions. When CASA saw the results, they weren't happy and they rejected it. And they told DPIE they needed to go away and do a second run under calm conditions. Catestone were very clever here, so they pulled the wind back to 0.5 metres a second, but they bumped the ambient temperature up by 7.2 degrees. And unfortunately, they went a bit too far because they came in with a much lower plume rise velocity because the three plumes didn't quite join together. And Stacey Agnew smelled a rat, so they took the 0.5 metres a second and the original temperature, and they ran a third case, and the third case really, shows just how bad this plume is. But so if we go back to the first run that was done, we've had an architect. I just want to show this if you can see it. The various colours there are the intensity of the plume, and that's at 700 feet. That's what the plume shape looks like at 700 feet. It's roughly, you can see the dimensions there, 90 metres by, anyway, so it's about 90 by 120 or something, I can't remember now. But what you can see, that little aeroplane that's drawn there, that is drawn to scale by the architect, and that's a 172. And Capestone have halved that maximum velocity because somehow or other that's all the aeroplane will see as it flies through that plume. So that this little diagram gives you an idea of the relative scale of the aeroplane, the plume, and what bullshit it is to halve the maximum. Excuse the language.
Straight talk. I love it. No, it's my style, John, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Matt, I want to bring Matthew in at this point in time because, obviously you've joined us for the discussion, and I'm very mindful that you're not going to be able to give us any CASA perspective. But having heard what we've just discussed, I mean, what's your reaction to that and the fact that this project appears to have walked its way through this process? Should this project have simply been re-reviewed by CASA before it got to this point?
Look, I think the reality here is it was for the state government, as I understand it, to approve the project, right? And CASA, my understanding was CASA didn't have any ability to stop the project. All they could do was say whether there was going to be aviation risk or not. And as I understand it, and John will know the detail here, but as I understand it, I think initially that was the case, and that's why they asked for the additional modelling. Of course, I'm going to come across as quite biased towards CASA, but on this. But the reality is, I think they were between a rock and a hard place because they weren't the approver. They were asked to give advice, and the complexity associated with this. I mean, it just shows you can use multiple models and have 3 models and get 4 different answers, right?
The thing that troubles me with this, Matt, and again, I know that your opinion would have to just simply be either your personal opinion or maybe the opinion of RAOs, but the fact that whistleblowers have come forward and have sought out an audience with the aviation industry to say we are actually seriously and significantly concerned that Energy Australia allegedly were manipulating the process simply to come up. And what I understand, if I speak in layman's terms here, and John, I know you're an engineer, you'll hopefully forgive me for not having the mathematics of it. But in layman's terms, effectively what they did was to say, right, if you had a direct pipe and the pipe was blowing vertically and it has a value of A, well, if we can come up with a way of just pushing a percentage of it a little bit wider, then the average technically drops, even though the core velocity hasn't changed and the core velocity remains escaping the exhaust at a significant unsafe level. And so their concern was that they just don't understand that these people have come forward as saying, we don't understand how the Civil Aviation Safety Authority let this through, because it was as clear as daylight that this was a problem. And what troubles them was that CASA seemed to have actively pursued an outcome to reduce the benchmark, to lower the pass mark to literally green light this project through.
Well, I understand that the AC that John's talking about was actually, well, certainly it was amended before my knowledge of the issue. So I don't know what took place around, why that was amended. That's certainly a question for CASA. I suppose where we're at today is that there is significant concern around aviation safety, and there's also significant doubt around the validity of any of this modelling, right? And I think that what this e-petition is trying to do is to seek another review of this, a transparent review, regardless of anything that's taken place before, so that once and for all we'll have the answer. I mean, John has said to me on a number of occasions in my previous life with my other hat on, if this thing doesn't pose a risk, we don't have an issue. Right? That's
right.
It's not a philosophical argument about having a power station. No. This is about aviation safety, and there is significant doubt around the validity of the data, regardless of whose data it is now. And for mine, this petition is critical, in getting government to come forward and say, yeah, okay, we think you're right. We think there's enough doubt. Let's actually take another look. What's the harm in taking another look? That's the other point of this, right?
Exactly.
Can I just make a couple of points here, please, Ben?
Far away.
I'd like to separate out and differentiate between plume modelling and aviation impact assessment. Now, Stacey Agnew's the company that did this recent plume modelling. I actually believe they've done a very good job. I think it's technically sound, and I think it's got high integrity. It was reviewed by a company called GHD, and I'll say they're competent. The problem is that Catestone, they orchestrated the plume modelling, so they dictated the inputs, if you like. And we all know if you manage the inputs, you can get the outputs you want. But worse than that, Catestone actually did the final aviation impact assessment, and the plume modelling itself, the GHD review was done on the first 2 cases only. It wasn't done on the third case, right? So the third case was a big case. Catestone argued that was a 99.98% case, which is a load of rubbish, and I've got the data to prove that. And they relegated that to the appendices. It was not reviewed. It was not part of the numbers. Now, Catestone's aviation impact assessment itself has never been reviewed. So the problem is not the plume model. I think the plume model's fine. I think they've used a lot of averages and the numbers are probably lower than what they should be, but it's so darn extreme that it doesn't matter. Now, what a lot of people don't appreciate is that Energy Australia originally had approval to build 2 or 3 small open cycle gas turbines. In this last round, they've taken the opportunity, and it's never been approved, that they've taken the opportunity to build 1 large open cycle gas turbine and put this cap on the top. And that's part of the problem. This plume's actually worse than every plume that was assessed up until until CASA and planning closed the doors on all the information. So I'm not quite sure whether that makes sense or not. But what I think is required is not a reassessment of the plume model. I think we could take the work that Stacey Agnew's done. It is close enough for a model. You could question some of the assumptions, but it's close enough. I think as long as Stacey Agnew were to work with CASA, what is required is for CASA to commission an independent third-party aviation impact assessment. There has never been an independent aviation impact assessment done, and that's where all the issues are. It's in the Catestone work. All right.
Well, John, I've raised the issue directly with Pip Spence, our new Director of Aviation Safety, and I've had the opportunity to sit down and to talk about this issue with her, and we're still waiting for a response. So she was going to put together a response for us on that, and I'm eagerly awaiting it. I mean, if you could speak to her directly right now, what would you say?
I'd say, Pip, you and David Kitto are the 2 people in this country that have the ability to fix this problem. One of you runs DPIE and one of you runs CASA. What is required is that the DPIE have the ability to revoke the approval, and they have the ability to require the approval not to be put again until CASA is commissioned to do an independent third-party assessment of the aviation impact assessment. That's what's required. If that is done genuinely and openly, so that we can all see the data, then if it says it's safe, then we pull our heads in. I know it won't, because the work that Stacey Agnew's done demonstrates very clearly that it's not safe.
Matt, what about yourself? Would you support that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. You know, I've had that discussion with Pip when she started, amongst other things, of course. But, you know, I think there is sufficient doubt in all of this. And, you know, the work that John has done, particularly about, you know, establishing the petition is, you know, so vital. And we need government, I suppose. I think I'm right in saying that, John. We need government to action that. and obviously for CASA to undertake their part in the puzzle as well.
I'd like to say one other thing. Between Catestone and Energy Australia over the last few years, they have made fools of CASA and the DPIE. And I'm sad to say that, but they've really gamed them very, very significantly.
Okay, so the purpose of tonight's broadcast is to talk exactly of this e-petition. John, you've put together an enormous effort, an effort that has been supported by AOPA, RAOS, Sport Aircraft Association, and a multitude of other industry bodies and association groups. And just about everyone that I speak to all holds the same view that the outcome that the local community are trying to pursue here is an outcome that the national community of pilots also want to achieve. Can you talk us through the e-petition, where it stands today, and how can pilots throughout New South Wales get behind this effort and put their voice to what has been 2 years of an enormous body of work to protect the safety of local pilots and visiting pilots to Wollongong?
And what is the e-petition? I think that's the other thing, John. Certainly, I didn't know what an e-petition was before all of this. If so, that would be great.
Okay, well, Ben raised the issue of whisperers, for want of a better word, from Energy Australia, and look, quite honestly, there've been an enormous number of people who have come out of the woodwork and said, "This is how you get traction," and one of them put us onto this e-petition, and what they told us was that if we followed the e-petition process, then we will get the matter discussed in Parliament, and that should lead to a review of the project. The e-petition process requires a member of the Legislative Assembly to be prepared to put the motion, and we have Anna Watson prepared to do that. It requires a certain number of signatures, and the e-petition is out there now seeking signatures. We're up over 116 or something last time I looked. For people to support us, what they need to do, the easiest way to do it is to Google New South Wales Parliament e-petition. If you Google that, you'll bring up the page with the petition on it. At the moment we're number 2 petition. It's got my name on it, and the petition is something about reviewing TALLAWARRA B decision.
And so they can also go to the RAO's Facebook page as well, because we posted that link yesterday, and hopefully great. I think Ben might have done the same.
I'm looking for the link right now so that I can post the link. I should have had that one ready.
Right. So now, a lot of people, and myself included, historically, when you try to help out with these things, they're quite complicated. This one is really simple. You go to that page, you press on the link, you press on the name of the petition. It opens up. You have to tick a box that says you live in New South Wales. You put your name, you put your title, Mr. or whatever it is, your name and your email address, and then there's a couple of other boxes to tick about whether you want to be kept informed and all that sort of thing. You press the button and that's it, all over. But you must live in New South Wales and you must give your name and your email address.
Okay, I've just got the link up on screen there right now. It's the www.parliament.newsouthwales.gov.au/LA/e-petitions-list.aspx. Now, you'd have to be a New South Wales state government organisation to have a domain like that for a petition, wouldn't you? How about New South Wales government /e-petition?
Well, it's worse than that, because when I put the petition in, they sent me the link and the bloody thing doesn't work.
So as John is rightfully saying, if I just bring it up on screen, it might also just be a little bit of help here. So let's bring up allow that and show that. Here's this is where this link is going to bring you to, and the review, the NSW DPIE TALLAWARRA B approval decision from Mr. John Cleary is second from the top at the moment. And if you click on that, it has a précis as to what this is about and what the petition is seeking. And it's very simple. You will select that you're a resident of New South Wales. I'll just do mine here and put my email in. It says, I do not want to receive email updates. No, I do want to receive updates. I understand my details will not be made public. And I accept I'm not a robot. And we'll sign in. Okay, look how simple that was. That took a few seconds. for us to do. And I think we would all agree that if you're a pilot, you're an aircraft owner, if you're a recreational pilot, you're a sport pilot, you're a glider pilot, you're a commercial pilot, you're a participant in aviation, you're a friend of a pilot, a family member of anyone connected to aviation, or you're just a concerned person from the Illawarra that shares our desire to keep aviation safe, then we would be encouraging you to sign this petition. And let's get behind this. If you're watching this broadcast, and I know tomorrow this is going to get shared to thousands of people, and Matthew, I would offer you the same, to extend this out to your RAOS membership via Facebook, and get people sharing it, get people sending this around. This is what your industry associations, this is the value of your industry representative bodies and associations. This is what we're doing. We spend our time, aside from certain issues, we spend a lot of our time working in the background on these types of matters to bring about meaningful results for aviation. But sometimes we too need your help, and we can't carry it on our own. We need hundreds, if not thousands, of signatures out there to help us oppose this project. And I think, just to recap, John, I'm going to leave that link up if you guys don't mind. We'll just leave it up on screen so that people can see it. But to recap, the simplicity of this issue is that we have before us right now a situation where an open cycle gas turbine power plant has come before CASA and the state government to be reviewed for its aviation safety concerns and its planning concerns. Through that process, there's been a great deal of manipulation, and so much manipulation indeed that whistleblowers, people in senior positions within Energy Australia, have been prepared to come forward and express concerns at how Energy Australia have conducted themselves in this process. For those of us that have been involved in this process, and John, you've been here from the outset of this, you are the man standing on this topic. You understand the technical aspects, and it's been as clear as day. It's been absolutely as clear as day that this project actually does not meet a sufficient safety standard, and yet it has managed, quite astoundingly, it's managed to navigate consultation, it's managed to navigate its way through state government, and it's managed to get an approval. So the only way the aviation industry is going to stop this at this juncture, and it should be stopped. Let's not make any confusion about this. And I know that I'm sending this video tomorrow to the New South Wales Premier's office. Let me be very clear in my language here. This project should not proceed under the current form. And we're not saying it shouldn't proceed. We're saying in its current form, and to the standards of to the velocities of efflux and the design right now, this project should not continue. It should be reviewed, and we should be encouraging Energy Australia, by way of as much motivation as the state government can muster, in going back to the engineering drawing board and coming up with a solution that is going to work to protect us. Aviation is fragile, and I'm certain that no politician wants to be the person responsible for standing in front of the news cameras when there's a fatality, trying to explain that a power station managed to navigate these processes. Oh, and by the way, the news is becoming aware that there were whistleblowers from within Energy Australia saying that the engineering wasn't sound. There was whistleblowers saying that CASA and the state government failed the people of the aviation industry and the state by allowing this thing to slip through the cracks. That's an awfully embarrassing situation for a premier. That's a terrible situation for the minister responsible for planning. So you've got an opportunity to stop it right now and to get it fixed, which will keep us safe, it'll keep the state safe, and it'll keep your job safe. Is that a good enough explanation?
Yeah, and I think the other, and one of our one of the people watching also called out, this is really important for the residents of the Illawarra. And as John mentioned, a new estate is being built, just nearby too. So we're talking about flight over populous areas, that in a situation that is, just beyond belief, that nobody is saying, stop, let's just check and make sure that this is all right. Yep. As aviators, we say clear prop, that's what we're doing. We're getting our head back in the cockpit to make sure that we're safe. And what we're asking is for others, in New South Wales Planning and CASA, to do the same. Okay, there's a bit of doubt here. Let's actually take a look and just see. These guys could be way out of line, and you know what? I'm putting my face to this as Ben and John are, and we could well be out of line, but we don't think so. Which is why it's so important to have this the review done.
Yeah, and just to reinforce that any person who lives in New South Wales with an email address can sign their petition. Any person in New South Wales.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you both for participating in this conversation this evening. I know it was very much last minute, as we want to try and get a little bit more momentum behind this signature process. I'll be banging on a little bit more tomorrow on another Facebook Live in relation to regional airports. We're actually really fortunately being joined tomorrow by the Economic Development Manager of TALLAWARRA Airport, Craig Sinclair, who's going to be talking to us about how the airport in their area is becoming one of their major economic drivers for tourism and business, and where those lessons can be applied to other airports. We have our AOPA representative from Cootamundra, Gundagai, Clinton McKenzie, who'll be joining us to have a discussion about developments that are going on at that site. And we'll also be joined for the first time tomorrow by our AOPA representative at the Oaks Heritage Aerodrome on the fringe of Sydney for a discussion as to the developments that are taking place there. And it's great to see more people taking the forward foot on the conversations around airports and these matters. So, Matt, an open invitation to you. The door is open for you to participate in as many of these. And I want to stress this because I know there's this. There's a lot of people out there that would have, they'd have this belief that there's no way that you and I could sit in a room together. There'd be shotguns at 2. And it's just not, it's a nonsense. I mean, we might disagree from time to time on certain aspects of regulation or industry policy, but it doesn't mean that we can't sit in a room together and talk our way through issues and also support each other on the issues where we have total alignment. And this is a great example where we're 100% behind the safety of the recreational community. We want to make sure that airspace is open and available. And that's a big shout out to CASA, by the way. It's time to let the RAOs have their controlled airspace access. Isn't that time that debate were well and truly long ended? And at the same time, we would like our self-certification medical standard for recreational RPL holders. I think we both share some shared ambition there, Matthew, and I think working together, you never know, we might be able to help push it across the line.
100%. And just a plug for, I've got a live stream. I didn't know about your one tomorrow night, but I've got one as well for our members. So it's all happening. It's all happening, and no doubt for Ben, it's the same. This is a good medium, and thanks to Ben for inviting me along tonight. But there's nothing quite like getting out there and pressing the flesh and actually seeing everyone face to face. So I'm sure we all look forward to that after this this crazy period. And
we'll see you all at Wings Over Illawarra.
Well, that's it. I was going to say, John, last word. We're going to be at Wings Over Illawarra. Unfortunately, the signature for the petition ends a bit too early. If it had been a little bit longer, we could have been down there at Wings Over Illawarra running around with iPads getting people to sign it.
Look, I should explain that I had the choice of how long to run it for, and I only ran it for a week because Parliament started sitting Tuesday this week. They only sit this week and next week, and I really want this in before they stop sitting this sitting, because waiting till next year is too long.
Well, I've given you a direct undertaking that we're going to get this on to Premier Perrottet's desk for a conversation. We're going to make sure that happens. And Matt, I'd extend that invitation to you as well. If we get that meeting locked in, I very much welcome you to join us in that conversation, because again, this is about our collective industry. So gentlemen, thank you very much. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, John.
Okay, as you can hear from the discussion this evening, this is an issue that greatly affects pilots of all stripes, whether you're a recreational pilot, whether you're a sport aviation pilot, or you're a general aviation pilot. This is an issue that is going to affect you if you're flying into and out of and around Shellharbour, Wollongong Shellharbour Airport. And so I absolutely implore you. I mean, guys, we're out there on these airports issues Monday to Sunday. You probably get sick and tired of seeing me on Facebook at times and reading stuff that I'm putting out. But, we're there fighting for you. This is about your industry, the safety of your aviation community. And we need you to play a role in helping us communicate this very important issue. So jump onto that link that I've got up on screen right now, https://parliament.newsouthwales.gov.au/LA/e-petitions-list.aspx. And my final word for this evening, and there's always got to be a final word, but I'd just like to very quickly discuss a follow-up to the Katoomba Airports issue. We broke news earlier this week that, quite unfortunately, the Katoomba airfield battle is drawing to a terrible outcome in which the New South Wales Department of Lands is not prepared to continue the lease of the site to the private leaseholder, and they're now requiring Fly Blue, who holds the lease over the Katoomba airfield site, to be out evicted by the 19th of November, and that time is approaching very, very quickly. This is a tragic outcome, make no mistake, and it's an outcome that will directly impact on the well-being of the lives of thousands of people across the Blue Mountains themselves. And I wanted to just briefly talk about this because this is an important issue. Quite often when we talk about airports and we're having conversations with the broader community about the value of airports, what seems to be the issue that catches everybody's attention is simply a complaint about noise. And there's no doubt that the Blue Mountains community chose to hearken onto this issue, and a small group of determined, I call them environmental warriors, latched on to the noise issue at the airport and the environmental concerns, and quite literally beat the street in an effort to generate as many signatures as they possibly could to see to it that the lease on this airfield was withdrawn. Now, they have unfortunately succeeded, and they have now pushed a result in which the airfield is now closed to private operations, and Crown Lands are simply saying, well, we'll keep it open for emergency services. But what Crown Lands have not offered is any plan whatsoever as to how they intend to fund the maintenance of this aerodrome. Now, this aerodrome needs a lot of money spent on it to repair the runway surfaces and to make the airfield safe. And if you've been around aviation for any length of time, what you would understand is that no government aviation provider will be flying into this location unless there is that money spent and the money is continually committed to maintain the site. That means, in all likelihood, we are going to see the closure of Katoomba Airfield entirely. That closure is going to bring about an end to 50 plus years that airfield has been there. For 50 years, the airfield has been there as an emergency location. If you're a private pilot, if you're a commercial pilot, if you're in a small aeroplane, a recreational sport or general aviation aircraft, and you're flying between Sydney and the western side of the Blue Mountains, it's probably one of the only locations where you're going to be able to make an emergency landing if something goes horribly wrong. And the site may very well make the difference between life and death. Its closure is absolutely impacting on aviation safety. And tragically, we learnt from the owners of the commercial owners of the lease that are now being evicted that the Civil Aviation Safety Authority provided advice to Crown Lands that there was no safety justification for the aerodrome to be there. Now, I'm absolutely astounded that that advice could have been issued by the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. And I know that I discussed this previously with Derek Larson in my last Facebook Live, but it's a fact. This has been put on the table by Derek, and he's adamant that this was the advice that was given to Department of Lands. Crazy to think that if you're a pilot and you have an engine failure and it's the only airfield within reach outside of heavily and densely wooded areas that somehow an outcome could be arrived at, that there's no safety value in having it. Now, as I said, that the closure of this airfield will impact on the people of the Blue Mountains, make no mistake. Come bushfires and significant emergencies, this is an airfield location that can make the difference between life and death, protecting homes and protecting the national park and protecting the flora and the fauna. Anybody in the aerial firefighting game will tell you that it's time on target that counts. Being able to get to the fire front and operate with frequency, uplifting those payloads into the aircraft or the helicopter and getting out to the fire front for effective fire suppression to take place. Now, with Katoomba closed, aerial firefighting will have to take place from Richmond. It'll have to take place from Bankstown Airport. It's extending the time. It's creating delays. It's allowing fire fronts to move faster and further, and ultimately threatening lives, threatening homes, and threatening the natural environment. And so for the environmental campaigners who have fought to close this airport, congratulations. You may very well have cost yourselves a large swath of World Heritage Park bushland come the next bushfire emergency and aircraft and helicopters not being able to adequately and swiftly address the issue. And it's, in fact, I received a letter from a concerned member of the community who wrote to me this week to impress upon me that I had absolutely no right in my commentary to suggest that the people of the Blue Mountains had no right to seek the closure of that airfield, that they had every right to provide their feedback and that they were satisfied that the closure of the site was lawful and that they were very much in support of it. And the question that I replied to that individual, I did thank them for contacting me, as I always thank people who write to me and to say you're absolutely well and truly entitled to raise your concerns. And for those of you that are seeking to do that, I'll put my email address up on screen right now. But I put the question back to them and I've said, given that the airfield's been closed and that the next time a major bushfire breaks out and the Blue Mountains community calls desperately on aerial firefighting services to come to their rescue, what would be their thoughts if our aviation industry says, well, if you haven't been prepared to support our infrastructure, why are we there to put our lives on the line to save your home? And it's a valid question. And I know it's a difficult question. It's not a question said with any malice or said with any spite, but it's a question that I think needs to be answered by those that have campaigned for the last 2 years to close this airfield. That if your home is burning and the only way to stop the fire front and to save the other parts of the community is to bring in those aerial assets, why are you asking members of the aviation industry to put their lives on the line to fight for you if you were not even prepared to support the maintenance and the ongoing availability of a basic facility such as an airport? And with that, I'll leave that as my final word for this evening. Let me know what you think in the comments, agree, disagree, or otherwise. Throw it out there. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, everybody, once again for joining us in on these fantastic opportunities to engage with you all. And I will see you all tomorrow night for our Facebook Live discussing Temora Airport and how regional airports can harness recreational sport and general aviation